Hey, Med School Made Easy. Got another video for you. This one's going to cover Hardy-Weinberg population genetics. This topic is extremely important for your introductory level biology classes. It doesn't really play too big a role in advanced genetics or board examinations, but it is important that you know it. The reason why it's such a tricky topic is because people often forget, why do we care? It's these math equations that are pretty simple, and it's just who cares? Everyone moves on past them, and then when they're asked to recall, they can't. So we're just going to quickly touch on them, and we're going to start on the reason why we do care about this topic. So Hardy-Weinberg Theorem or Hardy-Weinberg Equilibrium, Hardy-Weinberg Genetics, whatever you want to call it. Basically what these two guys at different points in time kind of stumbled upon this same mathematical equation that states that for a population of organisms, over time this population genetically moves towards and maintains the same distribution of genotypes. So what are we talking about with genotypes? We have other videos about this, but for this case, let's just stay simple with a 2 by 2. We have two heterozygotes. Well, that's way wrong. Sorry. And the resulting outcomes, as you know, in a 2 by 2 Punnett square that I just messed up and then corrected. And so the problem is that people say, if dominant alleles are so dominant and they win out in phenotypes and they're, if in heterozygotes the dominant one is the one that shows up, why is it that over time, you'd expect that a population would eventually be all dominant, right? It's like, think about it in terms of like hair color or eye color or something like that. If you have a dominant color of those things, then why isn't that over time all people haven't become, blue-eyed or, why are there red-haired people still around if these dominant alleles aren't winning out? And that's what these guys tried to put a mathematical equation on, and they actually demonstrated really well. Before we get into it, as everyone knows, there are some assumptions, some pretty big ones. Like you have to assume that all the organisms in this population are randomly mating. All the mating is sexual. There's no migration into or out of. There's very little disturbance. This is a pretty stable population of organisms. But that being said, it still is pretty remarkable that in nature there have been some very good experiments or trials of this equilibrium that have demonstrated it's actually true, which you can look up for sure. But the two big equations that we'll talk about here are this first one and this second one. Now what these P's and Q's stand for are the relative frequencies of alleles, the P being the dominant allele, like the big A, and the Q being the lowercase a, or the recessive trait. So this first equation here, on the right side, it equals 1, which basically means you're adding up to 100%. And these are the three types of organisms you can have. You can have homozygous dominant, heterozygous, or homozygous recessive. That's what the P squared, 2PQ, and Q squared respectively mean. The second equation, we're talking about like multiple equations here, P plus Q, which basically means all your alleles that are dominant, all your alleles that are recessive together have to equal 100%, because those are the only two options. So it makes pretty good sense when you think about it. As far as what you're going to see on a test or boards, the big thing is that these two equations, because what they'll say is if that the frequency of whatever dominant color of fur or something like that. So basically they're saying if your P equals this and your Q equals this, what frequency of your organisms are going to have a heterozygous genotype? Meaning if they give you P and they give you Q, solve for 2PQ, and that'll tell you basically what percentage of one, what percentage of one or what percentage of the individuals in your population, if Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium is correct, what number would be mixed or heterozygous. It's kind of a rough recall of what Hardy-Weinberg population genetics is. A lot of people get screwed up with it pretty easy, and usually it's because they don't remember what it's for or why we care. So there it is. Yep.